The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the ballroom floor as Emma Bradford smoothed the fabric of her emerald gown for the 5th time that evening. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to steady them. The dress had cost more than most families earned in a month. Yet standing in the center of the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom, surrounded by Philadelphia's elite, Emma felt like she was wearing borrowed clothes to a party where she would never truly belong. Robert Bradford, her husband of 7 years, stood 20 feet away, holding court with a circle of investors and board members. His perfectly tailored navy suit probably cost as much as the dress, and he wore it with the confidence of a man who had never questioned his place in the world. Emma watched as he threw his head back in laughter at something a silver-haired executive said, his hand casually resting on the lower back of Cassandra Hayes, his assistant. The gesture was subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, but familiar enough to make Emma's stomach twist. She had learned to recognize these moments over the years. The casual touches, the lingering glances, the nights he came home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. Emma had stopped asking questions 3 years ago, after Robert told her she was paranoid and unstable. After he suggested she see a therapist for her delusions. After he made her feel like her intuition was a character flaw rather than a warning system. A server passed by with a tray of champagne. Emma reached for a glass, needing something to occupy her hands. The bubbles tickled her nose as she took a small sip. But the expensive vintage tasted like ash in her mouth. This gala was meant to celebrate Bradford Industries' 15th anniversary. Robert had spent months planning it, insisting that everything be perfect. Emma had helped coordinate the flowers, the seating arrangements, the menu selections. She had smiled through endless meetings with event planners and caterers, playing the role of the supportive wife. But Robert had never thanked her. He had only criticized the shade of the napkins and complained that the floral centerpieces were too tall. Emma caught her reflection in one of the mirrored columns. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Her auburn hair was styled in an elegant updo that the stylist had spent 2 hours perfecting. Her makeup was flawless, applied by a professional who made house calls for women like her. But her hazel eyes looked hollow, empty of the spark that once defined her. There was a time when Emma Bradford had been Emma Hartley, a young woman with a portfolio full of architectural sketches and dreams of designing buildings that would touch the sky. She had graduated top of her class from Temple University with a degree in architecture. Professors had praised her innovative designs. She had been accepted into a prestigious firm's training program. Then she met Robert at a charity fundraiser. He was charming, successful, and persistent. He pursued her with the same intensity he applied to closing business deals. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, they were married. And somehow, in the whirlwind of wedding planning and moving into his mansion in Chestnut Hill, Emma's career plans got filed away. Robert said she didn't need to work. He said he wanted to take care of her. He said a wife's role was to support her husband's ambitions. At first, Emma had believed she could have both. She would be a devoted wife and still pursue architecture. But Robert's demands grew. Social events, charity boards, entertaining clients. There was always something more important than her sketches, something more urgent than her dreams. The years passed. Emma's portfolio gathered dust in a closet. Her drafting table was sold at a garage sale. The woman who once stayed up until dawn, perfecting building facades, became the woman who spent her days planning dinner parties and coordinating household staff. A sudden hush fell over the ballroom. Emma looked up to see Robert stepping onto the small stage at the front of the room. The microphone squealed briefly before he adjusted it with practiced ease. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert began, his voice carrying that smooth confidence that had once made Emma's heart race. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate 15 incredible years of Bradford Industries." The crowd applauded. Emma set down her champagne glass and moved closer to the stage, trying to be visible and supportive, even though Robert had not once looked in her direction all evening. Robert launched into his speech, detailing the company's growth, the successful acquisitions, the expansion into international markets. He thanked his board members, his executive team, his mentors. He talked about vision and perseverance and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who share your ambition. Emma stood near the front, her hands clasped together, waiting for the moment when he might acknowledge her presence. Surely after 7 years of standing beside him at events like this, after years of hosting his colleagues at their home, after all the sacrifices she had made, he would at least mention her. Robert's eyes finally found her in the crowd. Emma felt a flutter of hope, a foolish anticipation that maybe tonight would be different. And of course, Robert said, his lips curling into something that resembled a smile, but held no warmth, I should acknowledge my wife. Emma. She's standing right there in the green dress. Emma managed a small smile. Though her chest felt tight, Emma has been by my side for 7 years, Robert continued. And the ballroom fell into an expectant silence. She's been to countless events, hosted dozens of dinners, sat through more business conversations than anyone should have to endure. A few people chuckled. Emma's smile faltered. But let me be perfectly honest with all of you tonight, Robert said, his tone shifting to something harder, colder. My success has nothing to do with her. Emma is simply there. She exists in the background. If I'm being truthful, and I believe in honesty among friends, she's contributed nothing of value to my achievements. She's ornamental at best, worthless at worst. The words hit Emma like physical blows. The room seemed to tilt. Several people gasped. Others looked away uncomfortably. Cassandra Hayes, standing near the stage, tried and failed to hide a smirk. Emma's face burned. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. She would not give Robert or these people the satisfaction of seeing her completely destroyed. She turned on her heel and walked toward the exit. Ow. Her heels clicking against the marble floor with each step. The crowd parted for her, their faces a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. Someone whispered something she couldn't make out. Someone else touched her arm, but she pulled away. Emma pushed through the heavy doors and stumbled into the hotel's corridor. The sounds of the gala faded behind her as she walked faster, past the conference rooms and meeting spaces, past the elegant artwork and potted plants. She needed air. She needed to breathe. She needed to be anywhere but here. She found a side exit that led to a small courtyard garden. The October night air was cool against her flushed skin. Emma leaned against the brick wall, finally allowing the tears to come. 7 years. 7 years of making herself smaller, of silencing her dreams, of believing that if she just tried harder, loved more deeply, that Robert would see her worth. But he never would. She understood that now with painful clarity. To Robert Bradford, she was a prop, a decoration, something to display at events and then forget about. Emma. The voice was gentle, familiar in a way that belonged to another lifetime. Emma looked up through her tears to see James Mitchell standing a few feet away. He held his suit jacket in one hand, his tie loosened. His expression, a mixture of concern and barely contained anger. James had been Robert's rival in business for years. Though they had once been friends in college, he was also someone Emma had known long before she met Robert. They had taken an architectural theory class together at Temple. James had gone on to build his own construction and development company while Emma had abandoned her dreams to become Mrs. Bradford. I heard what he said, James continued, stepping closer, but maintaining a respectful distance. Every word. And I want you to know that he's wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. Emma wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it to be kind, James replied firmly. I'm saying it because it's true. You were brilliant in school, Emma. Your designs had vision and soul. I've always wondered what happened to that woman. She got married, Emma said bitterly. She made herself convenient instead of extraordinary. James moved closer, his dark eyes intense. Then maybe it's time she remembered who she really is. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and promise. For the first time in years, Emma felt a spark of something she had thought long extinguished. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. A tiny flame of defiance against the darkness Robert had wrapped around her life. Inside the ballroom, the party continued. Robert was probably basking in attention. Cassandra at his side, already having forgotten his wife's humiliation. But out here in the quiet courtyard garden, with autumn leaves rustling overhead and James Mitchell looking at her like she mattered, Emma Bradford began to consider that maybe her story wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. The morning after the gala, Emma woke in the guest bedroom of her own home. She had locked herself in there when she finally returned after midnight, unable to face sharing a bed with Robert. The room was decorated in tasteful neutrals, impersonal and cold, like a hotel suite. Much like her entire marriage, she realized. Sunlight filtered through the curtains as Emma sat up, still wearing the emerald gown from the night before. Her reflection in the vanity mirror showed smeared makeup and tangled hair. She looked like the ruins of the woman she had pretended to be for 7 years. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Dozens of messages and missed calls. Emma scrolled through them with growing numbness. Most were from people who had attended the gala, her messages dripping with false concern and barely concealed gossip-mongering. A few were from former friends she had lost touch with over the years. Reaching out after hearing about the public humiliation, one message stood out. James Mitchell had sent it at 3 a.m. Emma, I meant what I said. You deserve better than this. If you need anything, call me. And I mean anything. A friend, a lawyer, a reminder that you're worth more than he'll ever understand. Emma stared at the message for a long moment. When was the last time someone had offered her genuine support without expecting something in return? She couldn't remember. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. Emma, open this door. Robert's voice was clipped, irritated. We need to discuss your dramatic exit last night. She almost laughed at the absurdity. He was angry at her for leaving after he had publicly declared her worthless. Emma walked to the door but didn't unlock it. There's nothing to discuss, Robert. Don't be childish. You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues? The words ignited something inside Emma, a fury she had suppressed for too long. She yanked the door open and faced her husband. In the harsh morning light, she could see the lines of dissipation around his mouth, the coldness in his blue eyes that she had once mistaken for strength. I embarrassed you? Emma's voice shook, but not with fear. With rage. You stood on a stage in front of hundreds of people and called me worthless. You humiliated me deliberately, and you're worried about your embarrassment? Robert's jaw tightened. You're overreacting. It was a joke. No one was laughing, Robert. Except maybe Cassandra. His expression shifted, became guarded. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not blind. It means I've spent years pretending not to notice your affairs, your contempt, your complete disregard for me as a human being. But I'm done pretending. Robert stepped closer, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet tone he used when he wanted to intimidate. You need to remember something, Emma. Everything you have comes from me. This house. Your clothes. Your comfortable life. Without me, you're nothing. Emma met his gaze without flinching. Then I'll be nothing. Because nothing is better than being your possession. She closed the door in his face and locked it again. Her hands were shaking, but she felt more alive than she had in years. Through the door, she heard Robert mutter something vicious before his footsteps retreated down the hallway. Emma sank onto the bed, her heart racing. What had she just done? Where would she go? How would she survive? The questions threatened to overwhelm her. But beneath the panic was something else. Relief. Liberation. She picked up at her phone and called James. He answered on the first ring. Emma, I need help, she said simply. And maybe that lawyer you mentioned. Within 2 hours, Emma was sitting in a discreet cafe across town, meeting with Patricia Winters, one of Philadelphia's most respected divorce attorneys. James had made the introduction but stayed outside to give them privacy. Though his presence nearby made Emma feel less alone, Patricia was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened as Emma recounted the years of emotional abuse, isolation from friends, the systematic destruction of her self-worth. Do you have any financial documentation? Patricia asked, making notes on her tablet. Bank statements, investment records, anything showing marital assets. Emma shook her head. Robert handles all of that. I have a credit card, but he monitors the statements. I have no idea what we actually own. That's common in these situations. We'll need to file for full financial disclosure. What about infidelity? You mentioned affairs. I know he's having at least one with his assistant, Cassandra Hayes. There have been others over the years. But I don't have proof. Patricia nodded. We'll work on that. Pennsylvania is an equitable distribution state, which means marital property gets divided fairly, not necessarily equally. But we can push for more if we prove adultery and emotional cruelty. She paused, studying Emma. This won't be easy. Robert Bradford has resources and clearly isn't afraid to use them. Are you prepared for him to fight dirty? Emma thought about the guest bedroom she had locked herself in. About the years of making herself smaller. About standing in that ballroom while her husband erased her worth in front of everyone who mattered in his world. Let him fight, Emma said quietly. I'm done being afraid. The following weeks blurred together in a cascade of difficult decisions and small rebellions. Emma moved out of the Chestnut Hill mansion and into a modest apartment in Center City that James helped her find. She opened her own bank account with money from a trust fund her grandmother had left her years ago. Money Robert had told her to keep invested and never touch. Robert responded to the divorce filing with fury. He called Emma's phone 50 times a day until she blocked his number. He sent threatening emails that Patricia immediately documented. He had Cassandra call mutual friends and spread rumors that Emma was unstable, having an affair, suffering a mental breakdown. But Emma refused to crumble. She started attending a support group for women leaving abusive marriages. She reconnected with old friends from her architecture days. People she had lost touch with when Robert convinced her they were beneath her new social status. She pulled her old portfolio from storage and stared at the designs she had created when she still believed in herself. One evening, James came by her apartment with takeout, Chinese food, and found Emma surrounded by sketches spread across her living room floor. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down the food containers. "My past," Emma said, gesturing at the drawings. "Or maybe my future. I don't know yet." James knelt down and picked up one of the sketches, designed for a community center with soaring glass walls and innovative use of natural light. "This is incredible, Emma. How long ago did you draw this?" 8 years. Right before I met Robert." She laughed bitterly. "I was supposed to present it to the firm I was joining. But then the wedding planning took over and Robert said there would be time for my career later. Later never came." James set down the sketch carefully. "It's not too late. I'm 32 years old. I haven't worked in the field in nearly a decade. What firm would hire me now?" "Maybe you don't need a firm to hire you," James said thoughtfully. "Maybe you start your own practice. Take on small projects at first. Residential renovations. Small commercial spaces. Build from there." The idea was both terrifying and thrilling. Emma had spent so long being told what she couldn't do that she had forgotten to imagine what she could do. "I wouldn't even know where to start," she admitted. "Start with one sketch. One design. One project." James smiled. "And if you need office space, I have an empty suite in one of my buildings. Consider it yours rent-free for the first year." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me?" James was quiet for a moment, his expression serious. "Because when we were in school together, you were the most talented designer in our class. Because I watched you slowly disappear into Robert's shadow and wished I had said something. And because you deserve to remember who you were before he convinced you that you were nothing." That night, after James left, Emma pulled out her old drafting tools. Her hands remembered the movements even after years of disuse. She began to sketch, losing herself in the flow of creation. The design that emerged was for a small residential renovation. Nothing grand or ambitious, but it was hers. Her vision. Her work. 2 months after filing for divorce, Emma's case went before the court for preliminary hearings. Robert showed up with an army of lawyers, all from expensive firms known for aggressive tactics. He wore his most expensive suit and his most charming smile. Clearly confident that he would crush his wife's rebellion, Patricia presented documentation showing Robert's affairs. His financial manipulation, his pattern of emotional abuse. She had witnesses who had seen his treatment of Emma at social events. She had the video from the gala, captured by a dozen phones, showing Robert publicly humiliating his wife. Robert's lawyers argued that Emma was a vindictive woman scorned, that she had contributed nothing to the marriage, that she was entitled to minimal support because she had no career or income of her own. Emma sat in the courtroom and listened to them tear apart her character. Part of her wanted to shrink down, to apologize, to make herself small again. But then she caught James's eye from the gallery. He gave her a small nod of encouragement. When the judge asked if Emma wished to make a statement, she stood up. Your Honor, I was 25 years old when I married Robert Bradford. I had just graduated with honors from Temple University with a degree in architecture. I had job offers from prestigious firms. I had a future. Emma's voice was steady, clear. I gave that up because my husband convinced me that being his wife was more important than being myself. For 7 years, I made myself smaller and quieter and less significant because he needed me to be invisible so he could shine brighter. She looked directly at Robert. But I'm not invisible anymore. And I'm not worthless. I was never worthless. I just forgot that for a while. The judge studied her for a long moment, then turned to Robert. Mr. Bradford, your behavior toward your wife, both in private and in public, has been documented extensively. I'm inclined to grant Mrs. Bradford significant support while we proceed with asset division. Robert's face reddened with fury, but there was nothing he could do outside the courthouse. Emma stood on the steps, breathing in the cold November air. Patricia squeezed her shoulder. You did well in there. We're going to win this. James approached, having waited outside during the proceedings. How did it go? I think, Emma said slowly, a smile spreading across her face. I think I just won my life back. That evening, Emma received a call from Professor Helen Grant, her former mentor from Temple University. They had reconnected a few weeks earlier when Emma reached out to several old contacts from her architecture days. Emma, I've been following your situation, Helen said, her voice warm with concern. And I want you to know that the school would be honored to have you back as a guest lecturer. We're also starting a new program for women returning to architecture after career breaks. Would you consider being part of it? Emma sank into her apartment's second-hand sofa, overwhelmed. Professor Grant, I haven't practiced in years. But you haven't forgotten. Talent like yours doesn't disappear, Emma. It just goes dormant. Let us help you wake it up again. After hanging up, Emma walked to the window overlooking the city. The Philadelphia skyline glittered with lights, each building a testament to someone's vision and determination. She had once dreamed of adding her own mark to that skyline. Maybe she still could. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. At dinner tomorrow. I have someone I want you to meet. Potential client for your new firm? Emma stared at the message. Her new firm. The words still felt foreign, impossible, but also exciting in a way nothing had excited her in years. She typed back a single word. Yes. Because yes was how new beginnings started. Yes was how you reclaimed your life. Yes was the opposite of all those years of silencing herself, of making herself convenient instead of extraordinary. Emma Bradford was done being silent. Winter settled over Philadelphia with a vengeance. But Emma barely noticed the cold. She was too busy rebuilding her life piece by piece. The small office James had offered became her sanctuary. A space where she could spread out her designs and dream without someone telling her those dreams were worthless. Her first client came through an unexpected source. James introduced her to Margaret Chen, an elderly widow who wanted to renovate her Victorian townhouse in Society Hill. It was a small project, but Margaret had one condition. I want it designed by a woman who understands what it means to start over, Margaret said. Her dark eyes sharp, despite her 80 years. James tells me, you're that woman. Emma took on the project with intensity that surprised even herself. She spent hours measuring the space, sketching possibilities, researching historical details to honor the home's architecture while modernizing its function. Margaret became not just a client but a friend, sharing stories about her own life as a widow who had built a successful catering business after her husband died. People will tell you that you can't, Margaret said one afternoon, as they reviewed design options. They'll say you're too old, too inexperienced, too damaged by what you've been through. You ignore every single one of them. The renovation design was approved, and Emma watched with pride as contractors began implementing her vision. It wasn't a skyscraper or a museum, but it was hers. She had created something beautiful and functional, and someone valued her work enough to pay for it. But Robert wasn't content to let Emma move forward peacefully. As the divorce proceedings intensified, so did his campaign to destroy her reputation. He hired a private investigator to follow her, hoping to find evidence of an affair with James. When that failed, he leaked stories to society columns suggesting Emma had substance abuse problems and had stolen money from joint accounts. The attacks culminated at a charity auction in early December. Emma attended with James, partly as a show of defiance, and partly because she genuinely cared about the cause. Foundation supporting homeless youth. She wore a simple black dress, her auburn hair styled in loose waves, minimal jewelry. She looked elegant, but no longer tried to compete with the ostentatious wealth displayed by others in attendance. Robert arrived late, with Cassandra on his arm. Wearing a red dress cut so low, it bordered on inappropriate for the venue. They made a show of their entrance, Robert's hand possessively on Cassandra's waist, his laugh too loud in the refined space. Emma felt James tense beside her. "We can leave if you want," Emma said firmly. "I'm tired of running from him." The evening proceeded with speeches from the Foundation's leaders, a video showing the impact of their programs, and then the auction itself. Emma bid on a few items, modest amounts that reflected her current financial reality. Robert, meanwhile, made grandiose bids on expensive packages, clearly trying to demonstrate his wealth and generosity. Then the Foundation director took the microphone for a special announcement. "We're honored tonight to have someone who has volunteered to design a community center for our housing program. This person is donating their architectural services completely pro bono, and we're thrilled to announce that preliminary designs have already been submitted." Emma's heart skipped. She had met with the Foundation quietly a month ago, offering her services because she believed in their mission. She hadn't expected a public announcement. "Please join me in thanking Emma Bradford for her incredible generosity," the director continued. Applause filled the room. Emma stood, her face flushed, as people turned to look at her with genuine appreciation rather than pity or gossip-fueled curiosity. Several attendees approached to shake her hand and express interest in her work. Robert's face darkened as he watched. His ex-wife become the center of positive attention. He downed his whiskey in one gulp and strode toward Emma with Cassandra trailing behind him. "How touching," Robert said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "My charity case of a wife playing architect." "Tell me, Emma, who's actually doing the real work while you take credit?" The conversations around them stopped. Emma felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the old instinct to shrink and apologize. But then she remembered Professor Helen Grant's words from their recent meeting, "Your work speaks for itself." "Let it, I am," Emma said calmly. "I'm designing it myself. It's like I designed Margaret Chen's renovation and the office space I'm working on for the Riverside Development Project. You know, the one James's company is building? Please, you haven't designed anything in a decade. You probably can't even remember how to read blueprints." Actually, a new voice interjected. "Mrs. Bradford's designs for the community center are exceptional. Innovative use of sustainable materials, brilliant natural lighting solutions, and a layout that maximizes functionality while creating welcoming spaces." Thomas Reynolds, one of Philadelphia's most respected architects and a member of the Foundation's board, had joined their circle. Emma recognized him from her university days. He had given a guest lecture that had inspired her to pursue architecture in the first place. "I've reviewed her portfolio," Thomas continued, looking directly at Robert. "Her talent is remarkable. In fact, I've invited her to collaborate with my firm on a mixed-use development proposal we're submitting next quarter." Emma stared at Thomas in shock. They had spoken briefly at a Foundation meeting, but he had never mentioned collaboration. Robert sputtered, searching for a response. Cassandra tugged at his arm. "Robert, let's go." "You're making a scene? I'm making a scene?" Robert's voice rose. "My wife abandons our marriage, runs off with my business rival, and I'm making a scene?" Ex-wife Emma corrected quietly. "The divorce is final next month. And I didn't run off with anyone. I ran away from you." James stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying an edge of warning. "Robert, you need to leave. Now or what?" Robert challenged. "You'll fight me?" How noble. The white knight rescuing the damsel in distress. "I don't need rescuing," Emma said, her voice clear and strong. "I rescued myself." "You taught me something valuable, Robert. You taught me exactly what I don't want in my life. And for that, I suppose I should thank you." The words hung in the air. Several people had pulled out their phones, discreetly recording the confrontation. Robert seemed to realize he was losing control of the narrative. His face reddened, his jaw clenched. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Both of you." "The only thing I regret," Emma replied, "is not leaving you sooner." Security approached, having been alerted to the disturbance. Robert allowed Cassandra to pull him toward the exit, throwing one last venomous look over his shoulder. The crowd began to disperse, returning to conversations and the auction. Thomas Reynolds touched Emma's elbow gently. "I meant what I said about the collaboration. Call my office next week. We'll discuss details." After he walked away, Emma turned to James. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through her system. "Did that really just happen?" James smiled, something warm and proud in his expression. "You were magnificent." "I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway." They left the auction shortly. After walking through the cold December night toward James's car, snow had begun to fall, soft flakes catching in Emma's hair. She tilted her face up toward the sky, feeling the cold kiss of winter on her skin. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For reminding me who I used to be." James stopped walking and turned to face her. "Emma, you need to understand something. I didn't remind you of anything. You remembered on your own. All I did was stand beside you while you found your way back to yourself." Emma looked up at him. This man who had appeared in her darkest moment and offered light without demanding anything in return. The street lamps cast a golden glow over the falling snow, creating a moment that felt suspended outside of time. "I don't know how to thank you properly," she whispered. "Then don't thank me," James said softly.
Oh.
"Just keep being who you're becoming. That's all I want to see." Something shifted between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing quietly beneath the surface of friendship and support. But Emma also knew she wasn't ready, not yet. She had spent 7 years in a relationship that diminished her. She needed time to be whole on her own before she could be whole with someone else. James seemed to understand without her saying anything. He simply smiled and offered his arm. "Come on, I'll drive you home." The divorce finalized on a gray January morning. Emma sat in the courtroom and listened as the judge granted her settlement, a fair division of assets that would allow her financial stability while she built her career. Robert had tried to hide money, had fought every dollar, but Patricia had been relentless in uncovering his deceptions. Investigations into Robert's business practices had revealed fraud and tax evasion. Federal authorities were building a case. Several of his investors had pulled out. Bradford Industries, once a powerhouse, was crumbling. Emma felt no satisfaction in his downfall. She simply felt free. Outside the courthouse, Patricia hugged her. "You did it. You're officially Emma Hartley again." Emma Hartley. Her maiden name? Her true name. It felt like putting on clothes that actually fit after years of wearing someone else's cast-offs. Spring arrived with a burst of color and warmth. Emma's small architectural practice, Hartley Design, was growing steadily. The community center project was underway. Her collaboration with Thomas Reynolds had resulted in a beautiful proposal that won the development contract. She had hired 2 junior architects to help with the workload. Professor Grant invited her to teach a weekly seminar at Temple. Emma stood in front of students who looked at her with the same hunger and ambition she had once felt, and she shared everything she had learned about design, about resilience, about rebuilding. On a warm April evening, Emma stood at the construction site of the community center she had designed. The foundation was poured, the framing rising against the sunset sky. It wasn't a skyscraper, but it was hers. A building that would house hope, that would provide shelter and support for young people who needed a second chance. Much like the second chance she had given herself, James found her there, as he often did. They had been spending more time together, quiet dinners and long walks, conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. The connection between them had deepened into something neither rushed to define but both recognized as significant. "It's beautiful," James said, looking at the skeletal structure. "You should be proud." "I am," Emma admitted. "For the first time in years, I'm genuinely proud of something I've created." "I'm proud of you too," James said quietly. "Not just for this building. For everything. For leaving. For fighting. For becoming yourself again." Emma turned to face him, this man who had seen her at her lowest and never looked away. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," James corrected gently. "But I'm grateful you didn't have to." They stood together as the sun set over Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Emma thought about the woman she had been a year ago, crying in a courtyard garden, destroyed by her husband's cruelty. That woman felt like someone from another lifetime. Emma Hartley was an architect again, a teacher, a survivor. A woman who had learned that her worth was never dependent on someone else's ability to recognize it. She had been told she was worthless. But she had proven that a lie. Not by becoming something extraordinary, but by simply refusing to believe she was nothing. And in the end, that refusal had been enough. The construction site emptied as workers headed home for the day. James and Emma remained, watching the building take shape. Somewhere in the city, Robert Bradford was facing the consequences of his actions. Somewhere, Cassandra Hayes was realizing that men who cheat with you will eventually cheat on you. But Emma didn't waste energy thinking about them anymore. She had designs to complete, students to inspire, a future to build from the ashes of her past. "Coffee?" James asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Emma smiled. Yes. They walked together toward his car, two people who had found each other in darkness and were now walking toward the light. The future stretched before them, uncertain but full of possibility. And for Emma Hartley, possibility was more than enough. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.